So hard to see from the moment we arrive.
All right, so we are on location today, and what we're going to be talking about, I've got a few tips for you out there, especially for the beginners, when it comes to filming or doing photography and you are on location. So I've got the tips around being on location, and we're going to go through those step by step as we're actually filming kind of a mini documentary and getting some other footage for some other reasons for the business. But I just wanted to go through these tips, so let's get into it. Now, one of the tips that I don't even have my screen up. There we go. I was like, if it's there, I got to put it up. Now, one of the tips that we need to talk about is the location itself. Now, I like to try to shoot in locations that I know something about, but there might be times like where the client may ask you to film in a space that you have nothing, like you don't know what's going on with the space, you've never been there. So you really do need to do your homework. Pre-production would be researching that place, researching the backdrop, so what's going to be good about it, what are some obstacles that you are going to run into. But if you already know the space, then still research it, because there could be things that you're like, oh yeah, like so today I'm on a trail that is one of my favorite trails here in Colorado. But what I will say is that when I'm on a shoot, I'm looking at things a little bit differently. So just because you've been in the space before and you know it really well, think about it with like a new set of eyes, like a fresh perspective. And so I definitely recommend, even if you're familiar with the space, look at some of the different aspects that could really tease out some of that creativity that you may not have seen before. When we research the space, also going back to the pre-production, is researching what you're going to be doing there. What does the client want? So like, what's the scope of the work? And so as an example, today we're putting together a documentary style video, but we're also, so Marie's actually going to be getting some stock footage also for the business. So we're kind of doing multiple creative shots here, but what you really want to consider, especially if it's for the client or for yourself, what do you want out of the shot? Like, what do you want that creative to do for you? And so that's part of that pre-production process, thinking about all of that before you go in and shoot. So another thing to think about when you're on location is the gear. Now, even when you're in the studio, you should be checking your gear, but when you're out in a remote area or really just away from all of your stuff, make sure to check that you have your lenses the way that you need it, the camera bodies you're going to be using, you got cleaning devices, you actually have the batteries that are charged. So check that all before you leave. Check it when you get to location, because I'll tell you what, not only will your subjects and your client be pretty upset when your stuff is like not working or your batteries are not charged, you're definitely gonna be pretty upset about it too. So check the gear. Another tip to think about when you are discussing creative, whether you're discussing creative with the client or whether you're discussing creative like with yourself, whether you're having a conversation with yourself, like I talk to myself all the time. But what you wanna be mindful of, what you wanna not worry so much about is direction. And what I mean by that is directing. So directing the subjects, the models, the products, how things are laid out. I mean, as part of the talking to the client about the scope or thinking about your own scope of how you want things to look, do not be afraid to direct how you see the creative going. Certainly, if you have a client that's on set with you on location, you can talk to them a little bit about it. It's not like you have to paint the entire picture, but if you're talking to the model or the subject or discussing the products and how you want those laid out, you can certainly give some reason and some kind of context, but don't be afraid to make those decisions, because you're the one behind the lens and you're the one that's likely going to be editing it, or somebody from your team. So you're just trying to get the best shot that you can possibly get. And that kind of leads me into my next tip is sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time. Even if you feel like you've nailed the shot, you need to actually do it again. I always recommend shooting from different angles, and even if you feel like, everything is great, the exposure's dialed in, your ISO's dialed in, like the colors are looking amazing through, you know, the screen or whatever, or just like what the subject's doing, still, even if you feel like you've nailed it, get a couple more shots, because you will be surprised that when you get back to your studio that you're like, you know what, I really thought that that was the money shot, but I love the way that this shot actually ended up. So shooting multiple angles from multiple directions and shooting it multiple times, it can be cumbersome, and that's part of the direction process. However, you want to make sure that when you leave the location, because if this is like, you only have like one day of shooting or just a couple hours of shooting, get as much of the shots as you can, as many angles as you possibly can, and keep it, you know, reasonable. I'm not saying like, you know, shoot it 20, 30 times, but get some good shots that you feel comfortable with and you feel that creatively it's going to do what it needs to do in post. All right, so what I also need to remind you of is the shooting conditions. Now, right now, this is around noon. I highly recommend you to not shoot when the sun is high. Things can get overexposed, but we do have a canopy that's over us, so there's a lot of trees over us. However, I am using a little bit of auto white balance and auto ISO. I tend to like manual, so I will shoot manual as I see fit, but remember, even when you're under a canopy like this, if the subject is overexposed, the subject's going to remain overexposed. So just take that into consideration when you're looking at those shooting conditions. And also keep checking your camera, making sure that the frame rate is dialed in the way that you need it. You're shooting, if you're shooting JPEG or you're shooting RAW or both. And also, like I said, just keep checking your ISO and your white balance. And I always double and triple check as much as possible, because I do not like footage that is overexposed or way underexposed, although you can work a little bit better with underexposed footage depending on how underexposed it is. So I even wonder if I'm underexposed now. And of course, a couple of last tips that I want to leave you with. One being the fact that once you finish all of your shots, once you've gotten all of the footage, make sure taking those SD cards, go right back to your studio immediately as soon as possible, because you remember everything that happened rather than like letting this go for like days or weeks before you organize the footage. Organize and label that footage, put it in a folder in a ways that you will be able to do your post-production more seamlessly. But really what I want to leave you with is the fact that you're creative. Whether you're doing this as a professional or as a hobbyist, for yourself, for a client, regardless of how things get, like whether things are kind of getting iffy with the client, with the subject, with the products you're shooting or whatever, just try to enjoy the creative process. Try to just absorb the fact that you're actually doing something really, really cool, something that you really want to do. I mean, I hope that you really want to do that, but the fact that you're just out on location, doing something completely different, challenging yourself, taking that next step toward the bigger picture, and, you know, just have fun with it. So speaking of having fun, let's get out of here on this one. I want you to go out there and do those things that matter. I want you to keep rocking those faces, as I always say. I really appreciate you tuning in. Leave those questions and comments below. I'll be sure to hit you back as soon as I possibly can. I can't thank you enough for all of your time and attention. So let's go, get out, go rock faces, and I will catch you on the next one. So flip your hair around, like winging around like you're at a rock concert. There. Oh, no, don't do that. I was just kidding. Oh gosh. I think I got that though.